On the call with us today is Ms. Nazmia Kamri from the Community Oriented Policing Services Office with the U.S. Department of Justice. I'm going to turn it over at this point to you, Nazmia, if you have any opening remarks.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you to everyone for participating today on the impact of COVID-19 on labor trafficking survivors and service providers. And a special thank you to our facilitators and our speakers today for taking the time to participate and to prepare for this webinar discussion. On behalf of the COPS Office leadership, I thank you again for participating. And I really encourage you to use the chat box to provide your questions. For the next hour and a half, you'll have the opportunity to engage with the participants or the speakers and the facilitators and to hear how this COVID-19 has been impacting them. But it's also important for you to be able to share where you feel comfortable. So with that, I will hand it back to Amanda. Once again, thank you so much and hope you all have a great day after the webinar.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to do a brief introduction of our moderators and our speakers today on the call. Our first moderator is Ms. Flory Burke. She is a consultant on human trafficking to governmental and non-governmental agencies. She has 2 decades of specialized experience and is a leading expert on the victim-centered approach in human trafficking cases and efforts of criminal justice actors and victim care providers. She is the founder of Freedom Network USA and has done extensive training, speaking, and consultation on human trafficking issues. She serves as an expert witness on cases of human trafficking and has developed materials and trainings for global actors. Our next moderator is Ms. Evelyn. She is a survivor of domestic servitude. Since 2014, she has been an advocate with the Alliance to End Slavery and Trafficking, and she was awarded the Presbyterian Peace Seeker Award for her efforts to combat human trafficking. She served as a presidential appointee to the U.S. Human Trafficking Survivor Advisory Council and has presented nationally on the needs of labor trafficking victims. Ms. Chamba also serves as an ambassador for the Innovative Community Engagement Foundation's Granting Courage initiative, which assists survivors of human trafficking and was the first recipient of its annual scholarship. Two of the panelists today, our speakers, are survivors. The first one is Mr. Ronnie Marty. He is a survivor of labor trafficking and now works as a survivor leader. He speaks to national audiences and the media to raise awareness of all forms of human trafficking within the United States, specifically highlighting the existence of labor trafficking. From 2015 to 2019, he served as a member of the United States Advisory Council on Human Trafficking, providing policy recommendations to the President's Interagency Task Force to monitor and combat trafficking in persons. Mr. Marty has leveraged over 25 years' experience working with diverse ethnic groups and cultures to advance in the hospitality industry. And we also have Ms. Ima Matul. She is a survivor advocate, mentor, consultant, and former member of the U.S. Advisory Council. Ima is a founding member and formerly the manager of the Survivor Leadership Program at the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking. She has built a network of human trafficking survivor leaders nationally, and together with the Survivor Network, Ima has made an impact in the United States anti-trafficking efforts and policies. She has consulted with multiple organizations on starting and supporting survivor leadership programs, including developing training curriculum with Office for Victims of Crime Training and Technical Assistance Center on survivor professional development. Our next two speakers work with service providers. We have Ms. Suan Cheng is the Program Director of Victim Services at Mosaic Family Services, a safe haven for survivors of human trafficking and family violence. Mosaic Family Services provides shelter, legal counseling, case management, and other support services for survivors of labor trafficking and other victims of violent crime. Mosaic is also a founder and active member of the North Texas Anti-Trafficking Task Force and the North Texas Coalition Against Human Trafficking. She collaborates with a team to provide trauma-informed and survivor-centered services to support and empower victims. She provides professional training, community education, and technical assistance for local and national organizations. She is the selected member of the steering committee for the Freedom Network USA, the nation's largest coalition working to ensure that trafficked persons have access to justice, safety, and opportunity. Our last speaker today is Ms. Ileana Taylor. She became passionate about fighting for human rights while living through a period of unrest in her native Guatemala. Inspired by people who have overcome trafficking, she has dedicated her career to helping more people affected by this crime. She began working at Save Horizon as a victim assistance, which is a victim assistance nonprofit serving New York City. Save Horizon provides assistance, advocacy, and support to victims of human trafficking and other victims of violent crime. Ileana began her work in the anti-trafficking program as a case manager. She later went on to receive both a bachelor's and master's degree in social work, in addition to a certificate from New York University in trauma counseling. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Flory Burke to get us started today.
Hello, everybody. I really want to thank you so much for joining us. I see we have a lot of people, and that is very gratifying. Evelyn and I are really excited about this panel. We want to thank both IIR and the COPS office for sponsoring it. Evelyn and I have been working the last couple of years as subject matter experts on a labor trafficking project that IIR and the COPS office are doing. Today's presentation is meant to look closely at survivors and service providers. This pandemic that we're in has really brought new challenges to all of us, to all of you out there in Zoom land, and to all of us. And we thought it would be important to have a discussion between and among us to see how survivors and service providers are dealing with these challenges. And hopefully we'll come up with some techniques, some tips, some ideas, some questions. We hope to cover a broad range of subjects, and we encourage each of you to think about what you want to know, what you want to offer, ideas, questions, etc., and use the chat box. And we'll use the last half hour of our presentation to deal with that. And I'd like to remind our panelists to raise your hand when you want to talk. Most of us have taken part in family Zoom calls, and I don't know if your family's like mine, but everybody talks on top of everybody else, and we don't hear anything. So hopefully that won't happen with us. So we're really glad to have you all here. Evelyn, you want to start us off?
Thank you, Flory, and thank all of you again. Just like Flory said, we want to thank the IRR and the COP office for giving us this opportunity, to do this again. As you know, human trafficking is already hard enough, that we're still struggling with trying to come up with different solutions to combat the issue. But now, to add on to that, we have and I'm very appreciative for the survivors, but service providers as well. So thank you guys for being part of it. And hopefully, again, like Flory said, if you have something to say, raise your hand up for our panelists. And if you have your questions, you can put it in the chat box. And we also have the little reaction buttons as well. So if you're putting your hand up, we can't see you, you can just click on that reaction button and we'll get to you. So thank you guys again. And, Flory, you hit it off. Flory, you're on mute. Unmute yourself. On mute.
Just talking to myself here, aren't I? Sorry about that. Thank you, Evelyn. Let's start off with asking the service providers, what has been your major challenge in working with survivors during this time of COVID-19? Ileana, Sulan? Ileana, thank you.
So I made some notes just to remind myself. So basically, for me, it's been difficult to access my colleagues in a sense, right? We provide each other with a lot of support when we debrief in the office. So that space has been in a way taken away. Also, meeting with clients and providing, the practical assistance with clients has been challenging and difficult, because now almost everything is done, via, either phone call or video, and it is kind of difficult to really, meet with our clients to provide the assistance that, the program provides. And then the other challenge that we see, because of limited staff, not only in the program itself, but the agency itself, is been very difficult for us to access the practical assistance that we we provide. The turnaround has been quite slow because, of course, the limited staff. So that has been, for me, one of the challenges. And this connecting with clients via phone and video is is not the same as being in the same room. So that's been for me.
I would echo the same things that Ileana had said. I think for us, one of the things we've really noticed during this pandemic is really having to work with survivors who are trying to prioritize their health concerns or other needs over, their trafficking situation, or trying to heal or recover or moving forward. We've had situations where, survivors have been scared to leave the trafficking situation. They didn't want to go to shelter. They didn't want to even go on public transportation. And we're also seeing a lot of maybe disconnect or lack of being able to connect or follow through with survivors as they are trying to take care of other needs, again, and prioritizing that over necessarily the services we're providing or the work that we're doing. We also see a lot of foreign national survivors really being hit the hardest, because they're typically, in normal times, they're all, they're the most at risk or vulnerable. And that isn't any different in the pandemic. And especially, they're often at the front lines of the work or the industries, and they're not able to take time off, or they're either the first to be impacted because they have to work all the time, or they lose their job, or language access has become even more difficult with technology and organizations with different capacities being able to help and serve. And we've also seen with specific communities that we work with, just misinformation or lack of information being spread about COVID and assistance and what to do and what not to do. And that's been really challenging with, again, language barriers and cultural barriers.
Yeah, I also would like to add, kind of just, as Solange mentioned, some difficulties of clients kind of going out there and do what they need to do. Some clients have also need to go to the ER, and they say, I don't want to go because, that's where everything is happening, and I don't really want to, get sick. And also some of our clients have had COVID, and it's been very difficult for them to challenge it, all the challenges that Solange also mentioned, lack of, of financial assistance and stuff. So yeah, that's.
And then I think the only other, I know we're going to be talking a lot about different challenges and things, but one other thing I think I just wanted to add is that we've also seen it become very challenging for the direct outreach, or even being able to reach the vulnerable populations or the individuals that are going through trafficking situations. It's even harder to engage with the industries or the populations, or being able to see the signs, or be able to even provide information about services and help. And so we're seeing that happening a lot.
So Sulan, does that mean that your numbers have gone down because you're not able to outreach? Does that mean you're not getting the new client referrals?
I would say that, I wouldn't say that our numbers have drastically gone down. I do think that maybe our numbers have been impacted a little bit here and there. It's been this weird flux of, on one hand, I do think that less ability to reach survivors is occurring, but we're also seeing kind of like past survivors who were stable becoming less stable because either they lost their job, they've gotten COVID, or just different impact of COVID, so they're reaching back out for help, as well as there's always survivors who need help. So we haven't seen this drastic cut of survivors reaching out to us for help, but we have seen that we haven't been able to do outreach to communities the way that we've been able to before, or do more of that direct outreach. And we do believe that that's directly going to impact survivors or victims learning about our organization and services and what accessing help, especially in the long run.
And Ileana, I wanted to follow up on something you said that is so important. The first thing I think you said was that you miss being with your colleagues, with your staff, because you're so used to offering support to one another in the office. So where do you get your support for the work that you're doing and for all the stress that you're under in normal times and now during the pandemic?
You know, we do meet bi-weekly with my colleagues and have supervision as well, and then group supervision. And we occasionally have, like we call coffee hour with, you know, some of us meet and just talk about a lot of different things. But again, it's the personal touch that makes a big difference. You know, you do it online, you do it sometimes on the phone. And, you know, it's just like I mentioned also, you know, but the connection with the clients is a lot better when it is in person. So, but yeah, it's not that we completely lack the support. It's just different.
Yeah. Thank you. Evelyn?
Yes. Thank you, Flory. Thank you, Solange and Ileana. And, you know, this same question is similar to, you know, as a survivor, you know, myself, and which is why me and Flory wanted to have this discussion. It's been very difficult, you know, dealing with the whole new world of living. And not only that, not only as a survivor, but also as a parent. And, you know, and me also thinking, oh, wow, how are victims handling this new thing? How are they dealing with it? How are they seeking help and things like that? Which is why it was, you know, I was grateful that I could invite Rodney and Ima to come to share their own expertise as survivor advocate and as parents, and also some ones that I know that also are out there working. And a lot of the time survivors, you know, again, we do jobs that we were forced to do as, you know, in our trafficking situation. And not all survivors are blessed to say, hey, you have a job working from home. And it's been, you know, the service providers, they mentioned that. So Rodney or Ima, if you can take this and kind of just share your own experience as survivors and as parents, like what has been the greatest impact? What has really been the downfall due to COVID?
Thank you. And really appreciate that we're doing this and that we can actually let the world know what's going on during COVID-19 and what could happen after COVID-19. But as a parent, you know, deal with new situation, having kids at home and have to be just checking on them all the time, because now the internet, you know, it's wide open there, and it's where actually traffickers are trying to attract our kids, our family via internet. So I'm just more watching now what my kids are doing and getting used to the situation, but also seeing, because of the economic shutdown, you know, people losing jobs. I didn't lose my job. I just changed my job, but still I've been working with survivors that they're not being blessed or lucky enough to keep their job, losing their house because they can't pay rent. And when seeking for help, shelters have been closed due to the COVID-19 because of the social distancing and everything. So being difficult to access to shelters, and also access to some NGOs that used to provide the service in person, as Ileana was saying in Solange. You know, now it's everything over the phone, and because nobody was expecting COVID-19 to happen, so it's like nobody had a budget in place in case of an emergency like this. And that's what the survivors have been struggling, you know, getting medical assistance. Because when you go to the, when you want to go to the doctor for a regular visit, you cannot really have the access, because they are just accepting people with COVID, majority of the cases. And if it's really an emergency, it's when they will take care of you. But other things, it was impossible to get access to. And it's a little frustrating, especially for people, they are so concerned about their health and their mental health as well. Counseling, when you, like in my case, and I know when I did it, counseling is so important that you have someone to talk in person, someone that you trust already that been working with you. And then when you actually stop or postpone that process and you do over the phone, and also, language barrier, as they mentioned too, is an issue. And then all the triggering things that is happening, just being at home, because you don't have a place to move. You gotta be locked, is what he said. So it's been really, really difficult and impacted in so hard in survivals, so that we just get, some of them get traumatized for the situation, just being locked. Like, you cannot even go out. And it's a difficult situation. And of course, because of some of the survivor that needs assistance with legal assistance, most of at the beginning, everything was shut down. Now 50% they're working at 50% capacity, and you can get access a little bit, but still the cases are postponing and everything is like left behind. It's a lot of things going on right now that if people could know, have been difficult for people that has been a victim, have been trafficked, and then imagine for a survivor now. Survivors that want to go back home and they can't because of the airport being closed. It's just like the hope is it's uncertain what's going to happen, and if we're not there for them to, to encourage them, to support what they're going through, it's difficult. And when we find organizations that really want to help and jump in, it's great, because there are a few NGOs that whenever we try to seek for services, just to pay for a survivor telephone because the person lost his job, can't pay for the rent, there is no money. There were no money because there's so many needs that there were no money for that. So as I said, nobody was prepared for COVID-19 to happen. So there was no funding there for that. So, but the good things, and I really applaud that to all the NGOs that have been, when we refer to someone and when we are seeking for help, and if you have some funding or something that you can actually maneuver, and you can help and provide at least a $50, gift card, so you can pay for someone's telephone. That is great. If you help one person, you're helping. And it's what happened. There are some NGOs that they haven't been able to use all the money in what they use at work. But it's good, like if someone comes to you asking for help and you can actually use that money that you didn't use and provide to someone else, it's just great. There's a lot of things. So I just want to give the opportunity to Ima to talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie. So personally, as as a survivor, as a parent, this has been really challenging. I think like I'm preaching to the choir here, that all of us have faced this difficult challenge during COVID. So, I was, when COVID was started, I was blessed and able to work from home. But of course, there's a challenge, even though we're working from home as a parent. I got 3 kids at home that are doing remote school, like I have to be their cafeteria workers, I have to be their teachers, and then at the same time, I'm also working. I feel like as a parent, being at home is like a full-time job. And then at the same time, I was in school. So I feel like I'm in front of computer working, parenting, schooling, like almost 20 hours a day. And I can't imagine for survivors that were not able to be working from home, those who are furloughed, those who are lost their job, because I work with many survivors that have those challenges and they were not able to pay rent, they don't have computer or access to internet. So like, how are their kids gonna do remote schooling. And, you know, like in Los Angeles, in California, the school district were providing them with, you know, computer or laptop that they could borrow. But I just can't imagine those who don't have access to those type of things. And many survivors here in LA that I work with don't know how to use computer, you know, don't really know how to do Zoom, you know, how are they gonna meet with their case manager or their social worker to get their needs. So like I'm helping a lot of those survivors, especially who don't have access to computer, who doesn't really know how to do Zoom meetings. So like our work were kind of like shifting for doing professional leadership to kind of case management. It was completely shifted when I was still working, you know, a lot with the survivor leaders.
Thank you. I wonder, Sulan and Ileana, if you could follow up on a few things that Ima and Ronnie brought up. One thing was Ronnie was talking about no one really being prepared financially, no agency being prepared for this, and survivors needing more financial support to help them with basic needs. And are there ways to access funds for this? So that's one question. And the other thing that was brought up by Ima was this technology piece. When we think of people that don't have access to technology, not just to the physical screen, computer, tablet, etc., but the know-how, how to use it. I mean, my fellow panelists know that last week I couldn't get on. So, you know, we're all challenged at one time or another, but I wonder if you could comment on how you deal with that when you have survivors that can't really be in contact with you or with other people because of technology. So if you could just look at those two issues for a few minutes.
I didn't know who wanted to start. Maybe I'll start, Ileana, if she doesn't mind. Okay, so on both of those pieces, I echo what Ronnie said. None of us were prepared. And I think for our organization, I will just say that I'm speaking for our organization in particular. I think we got a little bit luckier because in our budget originally, we already prepared for general client assistance and financial assistance from different sources. So that was kind of already there. But I think that we also had to do a lot of conversations with our funders, which luckily most, if not all of our funders were really understanding, and everybody was hit by COVID. I would say that that's kind of like the one universal thing is that everybody got hit. So it made everybody a little bit more understanding and everybody kind of trying to scramble through the same thing. So we were able to talk to our funders to talk through budgeting or reworking line items. We really try to tap into our local community of that we're raising a lot of funding for COVID-19. And because of our partnerships that were already built, a lot of the money that was getting raised, we were able to kind of apply for, try to get from some of the local foundations or partners that we already had. You know, we definitely, the Freedom Network continues to do rounds of raising funds for survivors for their member organizations. So really, we just thought outside the box and tried to tap into every possible resource and try to look at our own budget and see what we could work around. And then as for the technology piece, I could spend hours talking about technology. The two things I will say is just more channels and options for survivors, in my opinion, is better. And so just not getting yourself boxed into saying you only can communicate with clients this way or that way. And then also being careful, like it's very important with technology to take in consideration confidentiality, privacy, safety, risk. All of those things are very important, but to not let that be the barrier to accessing services. So I think at the time when we first started, everybody was like, oh, we can't do this, or we have to do this, or we have to do a certain way. And we were getting really bogged down on the policies and the procedures and how to do it. And I think at the end of the day, we kept coming back to, we need to inform our survivors, but we also need to make sure that we're not letting all of these things create barriers or even more barriers. At the end of the day, we got to figure out a way to communicate with survivors, and we have to have a lot of options to communicate with survivors.
I definitely agree with Sulang regarding, technology in a sense, because we were scrambling, also how to, manage the confidentiality and all the other pieces of the, client work. So again, eventually we kind of just, figure out some way, and some of us kind of do a little bit of phone, and others do a little bit of video calls with the clients, and knowing, what the risks or intentions are in a sense. When it comes to funding, definitely also I agree with Sulang, my supervisor and the director of the program kind of, did everything they could to try to manage how to help our clients. And also we were able to tap into some funding provided by one of our, extra funding provided by one of our funders. So we were able to assist some of the clients with back rent or any other needs, like, providing food vouchers or cards to buy personal items. You kind of extended that a little bit more. So yeah, that's how one of the things that we managed to do in the program.
Thank you. You both mentioned coming up with options or different ways of communicating and not getting locked into the technology. Could you elaborate on what some of those options and ways are? Sulan?
I would say you name it and we've done it. I mean, we basically, I would say primarily in the past before COVID, we were kind of more locked into this like idea of face-to-face in person. We did, our staff had work cell phones, but they didn't, and they might've done phone calls and things like that, but we weren't really doing a whole lot of texting, email, video calls, all of that. So pretty much every communication channel you can, the social media, every communication channel you can think of, we're open to and trying. But again, you just have to make sure, again, to inform survivors of the risks involved and make sure they're making informed decisions about how they're doing communication. But, and then there's a lot of different platforms. There's a whole other webinars you could watch about just all the different kinds of platforms and which ones are the safest but pretty much every type of communication. We still do in person, we do video, we do email, we do text, we do messaging, we do social media, WhatsApp, Facebook. So really trying to be open to all sorts of communication channels.
That's definitely has happened with us too. We do all that, and a lot of clients kind of have relied a lot into texting, and they love to text. So that's basically where I come in. They text and we text back and forth. Definitely WhatsApp. And I had a client who was able to travel for a little bit, so the person and I basically kind of connected, via video call, for a few times. So, but yeah, again, I agree with Sulang. Everything that you can name, we have tried. Yeah.
Go ahead.
May I?
Oh, go ahead, Ronnie.
Thank you. No, it's about the communication channels. Different channels are getting COVID-19. Solania mentioned that you still do it in person, some of the things, but there are a lot of NGOs that are not doing in person. Everything is over the phone, calls or some. But I believe this is the time if some of the others are not doing it, is it the time to start being more open to what's going on? And if we follow the protocol and procedure, safety for the social distancing and mask, face mask, I think little by little we can start providing in-person service to survivors that is in a big need to have that contact. As long as we take the precaution, I think we could be okay, but I think we need to start opening more.
Yeah,
oh, sorry. Sorry, Celine, go
ahead.
No,
it's okay. I was just gonna follow up and say, you know, for us, we kind of, in some ways we don't have an option because we run an emergency shelter for trafficking survivors and domestic violence and other types of survivors. So, you know, from the moment COVID hit, we never completely shut down in-person services. You know, a lot of staff have moved over to remote working, but we've tried to find workarounds. So like we definitely do the social distancing. We set up stations in our office for in-person meetings with like the shield and space big enough to do 6 feet of social distancing. We have done things, we've done creative things like if we need something to be signed, we'll take it over to a survivor's home. We'll leave it outside their door. They sign it. They talk them through everything on the phone as they're signing, and then they put it back outdoors and we get the forms that way. So we've tried to be as creative as possible in this time of remote working. So
thank you, Solange. I just kind of want to echo what Ronnie and Ima had said. Again, they mentioned two important things that sometimes we really overlook as survivors, which was like mental hit. I think Ronnie talked about trauma. And another thing was education that Ima Mutu mentioned. You know, I can understand because as a parent and as a survivor, it was like, hey, my education was taken away from me. And now I'm here, I have to be that teacher, that dad, that, you know, I'm still, you know, English is my second language. I'm still trying to work on a lot of that. So, you know, and a lot of foreign victims, you know, a lot of foreign survivors are probably dealing with a lot of that issue as well. Like, you know, they have to help their kids with like, hey, you know, my son just came in right now. I'm like, just go talk to Google. I can't right now, you know, but that's a very important point. You know, my education was taken away from me, and that's something that I'm still struggling. I'm still working on it. So I can echo what Imo is saying, you know, having to be a full-time teacher, being a personal assistant, you know, again, Ronnie said it, we were not prepared for this. We were not prepared for COVID-19, but these are some of the things that I feel like now that it has happened, organizations have to look at it like a backup plan, trying to come up with different, you know, solutions on this issue. And funding has always been a big issue when it comes to human trafficking. You know, a lot of organizations, sorry, we don't have funding for this. Sorry, we don't have funding for this, you know, which we understand, you know, but how do we get this funding? The funding is out there, you know, and victims are stuck in farms right now. They're like literally, probably some of them have been dead due to COVID, but we have no way of reaching them, you know. So this is why this conversation is important. And we're sharing our experience, but we're also trying to come up with, you know, with solution. And I know finance is always the biggest issue. And it's something that needs to definitely figure out how to give survivor, because yes, 200 is great, but for a victim that just lost a job, for a survivor just lost a job and have 3 kids, that's not enough, you know, that's not enough. And then another thing that Ronnie mentioned, trauma, mental health. That's something that there's never enough resources for that. It's like, as a survivor, I had to pay for my own therapy session, you know, and now imagine I was trafficked, locked in the house, cooking and cleaning, beaten, sexually exploited. And now COVID has happened. I've been stuck in the house, locked, closed in and everything. How are we dealing with that? How are we even able to even sit here and even talk? You know, why is it that we cannot get free counseling, free therapy? We're dealing with this issue that we were forced into, and then now we are stuck in the house and all the memories are coming back, you know. So that is something that we really have to look into, our mental health and education for survivors that have kids that can get free tutoring for their kids and things like that. If any of my colleagues have any more things to add to that, but I just feel like that's one of the biggest issue that COVID-19 has really impacted survivors and victims of human trafficking.
I think Ima has her hand up.
Yeah, so I have like a recommendation or something to think about for service provider. So when it comes to like providing resources and assistance to survivors, regardless of, you know, trafficking, domestic violence, sexual assault, anything, I know that because the survivor that I work with are no longer in services, or those who already graduated or don't have access to social services providers. And my recommendation, I know that because I work with an organization for 8 years, I know how the funding works. And most of the time that if you're not a client, then we cannot help you. Like the funding that we had is only for like a current client. For an example, what about your graduate client? What about your past clients who graduated from your program? Like set aside a funding for that as well. I had to like fundraise on my own to help other survivors with groceries, with rent assistance. Also, when it comes to providing a gift card, things about a gift card where they can actually or like physically take it to the market and buy groceries, not gift card that they only can purchase things online. I have like maybe about 4 elderly survivors that I work with and you know, helping them. They don't have access to, you know, internet. They don't do an online shopping. So how are they going to use their gift card that they receive from an organization if they don't have access to computer, or they never done an online shopping and the gift card that they receive is only for online shopping? So like, how are they going to use it? How are they going to utilize that? You know, so think about that when you are providing assistance to your clients or to survivor. Counseling. You know, before COVID, people are seeing their psychologists in person. Now, because of COVID, everything, you know, has done remotely, even with medical field. You know, now doctors do telemed, seeing their patients through video, you know, but counseling is very different. Counseling, we have to be in person. So it's very difficult for survivors to share about their feeling, to share about their trauma, doing it on Zoom. So most survivors now are not seeing their counselor anymore because of that feeling of being uncomfortable, being not, you know, it's not like the online world is not safe space, as we all know. So now survivors that who used to see their counseling, they don't see them anymore. Same thing with seeing, you know, like medical for their health. You know, like I personally refuse to go see a doctor because I don't want to get COVID. You know, I don't want I refuse to take my kids to their dental. It's been a year, and because I don't want them to get COVID, you know. So it is very challenging and difficult, and we just have to help and support one another.
Thank you, Ima. And I think that whole subject of mental health is so critical, particularly now when there's just so much widespread anxiety. Everything is uncertain. There's no timeline for the end of this. People are anxious. And, you know, those who had emotional issues before, they're probably exacerbated now. And your points are very well taken. I'm not sure that because of the setup of a lot of agencies and programs that in-person can take place. And I think people are having to do the best they can. And I'd like to ask Ileana and Sulan, because I know they both provide counseling, if they're seeing the issues that survivors are bringing in, are they different from the mental health issues that you were seeing before? And how do you get around that lack of personal contact when you're not doing counseling in person? So if you could look at either of those. Ileana.
Just before I respond to the question, I just want to kind of respond a little bit to what Ima said about technology. I personally had a client that had no technology knowledge whatsoever. So one of the things I did, I mean, and also there is other colleagues in the program, was that we helped that person or those clients use be at our able to use the computer to access the food that we were able to provide them. So we work in that way. In regards to the question about the connecting with clients, for me personally, I've been really surprised with some of my clients who have been very open to to work within the context of video calls and phone conversations, and they have come, they have walked the line, right? They said, okay, you are this person. I probably won't see you for a while in person, or I won't see you on video call, but you're calling me and you're providing me with some kind of, support. So again, it's very amazing to me how they are open to it. When it comes to really assess the situation of what they've gone through, occasionally, I'm not saying it has not been easy, because in person you are able to see the reaction of the person in front of you. Via video call, it might be a little bit easier, but again, as I've been saying all along, the personal touch is not the same. And the issues that have come up, we talk about isolation, right? We talk about the memories of the trauma coming back, and definitely that has happened with a lot of survivors. Even those survivors that were somewhat stable prior to the pandemic, that they have come back and they say, oh, I don't know what's going on with me, but I feel X, Y, and Z, and and just trying to acknowledge that and explain to them that or at least normalizing the situation, validating their feelings has been a lot, at least the way that's been my experience. That
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that, Ileana? The experience that some of the survivors have, where they usually see their counselor in their office in a safe space with the privacy, doing things remotely now over the phone or over the computer. Some people are living at the shelter with other people or with other survivors, or they're living with someone else at home. and they're not feeling comfortable hearing that someone else would hear their conversation. So it's like that type of like the issue with privacy where they don't have, like how could you make sure that your client or the survivor have that access, or making sure that they have a privacy?
For me personally, I usually try to meet, if I would say the word meet, with the clients during the time that they know they have privacy. And yes, definitely it doesn't happen all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I usually make sure that they are, you know, in a safe space. And usually the first question I ask is, you know, this is the time that we have to talk. Is this still a good time? Is this still, you know, is safe for you to talk? So that is important to acknowledge. So if they say no, then, you know, the conversation turns, you know, into something different than counseling. But just knowing that, you know, I reach out to the person and make sure that they have that time to, you know, to talk about anything else, right? Is important. They just, you know, that contact is important for them.
Ronnie.
Yeah, thank you. And I thank all the organizations that are doing their best to, you know, to create a safe space for survivors to contact them and that they can speak. But believe me, as Ima is saying, it's when you live with someone else, with even on a shelter, it's just so difficult. You cannot open yourself. They might tell you, and I'm sorry, it might be not your case, but they will tell you everything is okay. Yes, I can speak now, because they cannot even speak. There are people around. They are so afraid people to hear even what they are saying. Even if they're in a room, in the same house, but in a separate room with the door closed, they are concerned that they are hearing what they are talking. So they don't want that. They don't want to. It's a feeling that you have. It's not secure. You feel so insecure that you don't want to talk. That's what it is. And then what happens with the time, it just keep accumulating in you. And you feel, you as a provider, you think, oh, I'm helping because it's the feedback that I'm giving you, but it's not a true feedback. I'm actually dying inside to tell you how I'm really feeling. That's what I echo with Ima about, you know, privacy and try to do something and bring back those people and do the session in person, just taking the precaution that you have to do. But there will be cases more critical than others, but we have to prioritize on that. Thank you.
And privacy is very important, but it's so sad that we have to do everything through technology, because if a victim do come, you know, and the things that they want to say, let's say if that situation was a gang related situation, you know, you don't know who is listening into your conversation, and you're also afraid, you know. I know Eliana mentioned WhatsApp, you know. I know right now I'm like working on a case. It's an immigration case. I have to like kind of be careful on like what I'm texting on WhatsApp, you know, and things like that. I had to call the person because the person is in Cameroon, and I'm just like, okay, I have to be careful, because sometimes I can hear like somebody's like listening into my conversation, you know. So how do we tackle that part, you know, Sulana, Eliana? Like, I think, you know, again, survivors will not be able to like, hey, no, I don't want to text because I don't know if my trafficker has a way. Again, don't forget, human trafficking is a big business and technology plays a big part of it. And now with this whole new world of living that everything is in technology, a lot of victims will be scared to say, let me text Eliana on WhatsApp and make this statement. And they're just afraid. So how do you guys handle that?
Yeah, I echo and agree with everything you guys are saying. I'm not a counselor at our agency, and I don't supervise our counseling team, but we have had many discussions with our counseling team in which they have expressed just how challenging it really is to provide counseling right now, especially telehealth and remote and you know, so I don't even want to pretend like there's an easy solution. There really isn't. I think the best thing I can just say is so for example, I know play therapy is impossible right now. Like that's just not able to be possible through telehealth. You might be able to do individual counseling, you might be able to set up support group, but there's really very few ways to do play therapy with children or minors or kids. So at our shelter, what we really try to do is provide the technology in the private space. So at least if you're at the shelter, you have a private room, you have technology, there's headphones, like nobody's listening to your conversation on a safe channel. Our shelter counselor, I do believe that at least our shelter counselor is sometimes still doing some face-to-face when it's absolutely necessary, when just other technology will not work out, but we're just not able to do that yet at our non-residential center. I will say from case managers or advocates' point of view, really we oftentimes have to step into, like, I think it's really important to provide orientation and education about the technology, right, from the get-go, so that they know how to access a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams or Google Meet or whatever it is that is going to connect them with the counselor or the service provider. I think being creative while still recognizing privacy and safety. So we've had survivors where going for a walk around their neighborhood and talking on the phone for a session or for, even just case management services was actually more safe or private for them than being in their own home. And I know our counseling team, they go through a whole list of checklists of how to set up the space and how to set up their own space and what to take in consideration to avoid distractions, other people listening in, safe words. And so there's a lot of things that are being done. It doesn't absolutely replace the face-to-face. I would 100% agree. I know some of the issues we were seeing. I know at one point our counseling department was offering COVID-19 specific support groups that were just focusing on the impact of COVID on survivors. And so that's something else we were trying to do. I think it's about, at the end of the day, having a conversation with the survivor. What we've often seen is face-to-face is best, but having just some kind of contact and discussing all the options through with the survivor and figuring out what feels the most comfortable for them and what they can do, whether that means you have to have more frequent, like maybe you have to have shorter sessions that are more frequent throughout the week, or, because of time consideration, or, maybe if you have staff or you're able to, you could do more of an outside meet at a park social distancing conversation. So you just, flexibility and accommodation is kind of the biggest two words, I think, during this time period. And so.
Thank you. And I know we're almost at the end of this section of the program. We're going to go into the chat, but something that I haven't brought up that I wanted to hear from each of you about is how your clients, how survivors are interfacing with law enforcement during this time. Ileana.
Based on the conversation that I have had with my, legal colleagues, right? A lot of times they have been also, Zoom called, right? Occasionally they have been one-on-ones, or sometimes those one-on-ones can, in person are scheduled, but things happen at the last minute, and then they have to be canceled, and that kind of takes a toll on the survivor as well, because as we know, talking to law enforcement is always nerve-wracking, and the survivors kind of build up until that moment, and then things happen, and then they don't meet with law enforcement. So it is kind of a little bit of everything, right? So sometimes it's a video, sometimes in person, and sometimes cancel sessions. So it is similar to the way that we provide, right? So it is video and or occasionally phone. So that has been my experience. And
are you on the call with them when they're talking with law enforcement, or?
No. I as a social worker, I am available to talk with the client before the session or after the session if they do so needed. So, but yeah, I'm not in the conversations at all.
How about others of you experiences of the survivors working with law enforcement during this time? Ronnie?
Yeah, at the beginning, actually, it was zero contact. Like it was impossible to do it. Everything was canceled, postponed. Especially here in Florida, because I think they were working so hard on trying to the community, the people, the citizens, that they follow the law about social distancing, and they were working more in the stores, just making sure everybody is doing what they're supposed to do. So at the beginning it was difficult. Now they are a little bit open on that, but it's so difficult just to set it up because it's over the phone. And in cases that I've seen is you need someone to interpret it. During that conversation, it's someone that you're not looking at. I mean, it's just difficult for the survivor. I know it's difficult for the law enforcement, just to capture all the information they want and follow up with other things that they have to do. But for the survivors, it's so frustrating just to do it that way.
So it's difficult in normal circumstances, and it's just more so now.
Exactly.
I think I would just add, like I said, a lot of our services have moved over to remote. I think interacting with law enforcement, while some of it is happening over the phone, video, we're trying to find good workarounds. We have found in our experience that law enforcement action is one of the few times where really you have to do it in person, whether it's the attorney meeting or the advocate or, even going to a police station. Like, it's just one of those things that it's really hard to do remotely or to do it well, especially providing emotional support and thinking through all of those pieces. So again, just safe social distancing practices and trying to limit how often you have to do that, but I know that our advocates have accompanied survivors, like met them when they're meeting to meet with FBI or something like that, and having to do kind of that in person. The other thing I was going to mention is reunification at the airport with IOM. Like, that's also impossible to do remotely. They won't allow you to do it. So I think it's about having that conversation with your organization and you guys determining, trying to balance concern for everybody, including the staff, but also balancing meeting like the survivors' needs and survivors' services. So,
well, this has been really rich and really great, and I feel like there's so much that we could continue to talk about. But Amanda, are you going to lead us through the next section, the questions that have come up in the chat?
Go through those. Thank you to the people who've been typing in questions. And there's
can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Not very well.
Yeah, speak through the mic, Amanda. Like.
Hello?
Yes.
That's better, Amanda.
Okay, can everyone hear me better now? Is that more clear? Okay, sorry about that. Yes, we had a couple questions come through the group chat and a couple comments. So I'm just gonna kind of start up at the top. Right. So the first one is kind of more for our service providers. They were asking if they could hear more about what you're doing to kind of protect the confidentiality and privacy of survivors now that things have kind of turned into this online video chat, phone chat situation, which I know you kind of talked about that earlier, how things are kind of becoming more out in the open. So just kind of addressing how that's working.
I guess I can, so again, there's like entire multi-series of webinars about this. So I'm just gonna, the two of the best resources we have found to kind of engage all of our policies and practices is NNEDV, which is the National Network to End Domestic Violence. It is, but they focus on not just domestic violence, but like violence against like sexual violence and trafficking. But anyway, so they have like an entire digital services toolkit where they walk through like every consideration, thinking through vendors, thinking through policies and procedures, different platforms, disclaimers. The other one is, I think, I'm going to get this, I'm going to butcher this wrong, but I think it's VLRC, it's the Victim Legal Rights Center, and they produced a lot of good resources for working remotely with survivors and thinking through confidentiality, VAWA, HIPAA, all of those different things. So I think it's a lot of just informing survivors from the get-go and providing like an informed consent for digital services and including disclaimers and making them aware and talking through the safety concerns with each of the different platforms. And you'll have to kind of tailor that specifically, like a technology safety plan almost with each survivor as you're engaging with them through digital services.
Great resources.
I'll try to get the links and try to pop them in if I can or share them somehow.
Thank you.
And so that's exactly what I was going to say, right? We talk to the survivors about the issues of confidentiality. At least that's what I do. I mean, this is, you know, video call, and sometimes occasionally it's a Skype or WhatsApp and Zoom. So they are aware of, you know, that the confidentiality piece. But yeah, so I kind of explain it so much clearer than I do. But yeah, that's. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think kind of the second piece of that question, I apologize if I'm not addressing this right, is also just safety of the providers in the COVID world, where, like you said, there's a lot of services that you cannot do remotely and you have to interact face to face. Kind of what we're looking at is, I know you mentioned earlier, Suzanne, about, you know, you've got some barriers up, you try to do the social distancing. I'm sure we've all encountered places we've gone where everybody's, you know, they've got a mask on and there's markers on the floor, stand 6 feet apart. So just kind of how you're looking at protecting, you know, both the people that you serve, but also your staff.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a space that, I guess what I wanted to kind of add upon that is it's just really important. I mean, I think it's top down. So like as a service provider organization, you and your administration and your ED and your supervisor, you have to have these conversations of how to balance that and how to protect, like, again, thinking through the staff, but also thinking through the survivor needs. And you need to have a lot of support from the top down. And if you don't have that, if you don't have the support for the self-care, if you don't have the support for thinking through how to think outside the box and provide service for survivors, I think that's going to be very challenging. I think for us, and I will just speak to the case management services at our program, we continuously ongoing have a conversation of, yes, we support the idea of trying to do as much remote and not putting anybody in danger, but what are the absolutes? Like, you know, what are the situations in which it's absolutely necessary to do something in person? And we try to balance that. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. Some of the other items in the chat were more just general comments. People were pointing out how helpful it was that you were pointing out the issue of, for example, teaching your kids at home when maybe you don't have the formal education that you're trying to teach the kids, and just struggling with that aspect of, you know, COVID life and parenting. Did you all have anything else on that subject that you wanted to bring up?
Ima, do you want to?
I would say that I saw the chat about that. I would say, like, maybe as a service providers provide this type of trainings. I know that the school that I know here in Los Angeles, they provide parents with all type of like workshop and on how to like support your kids at home, things like that. Maybe that the service providers could do the same as well. But the challenge is, again, like I said over and over again, not that many parents, especially for a national, have access to internet, have access to computer. They don't know how to navigate this type of resources. Maybe training just to how to use the computer, maybe that would be a good start.
Yeah, I agree with what Emma said. Again, not a lot of survivors have, computer knowledge and things like that. And maybe their kids having question about something will be very difficult. And for a lot of organizations, they need to start coming up with a lot of those resources for survivors that have kids and that are also dealing, like I mentioned earlier, that are also dealing with their own trauma as far as like their education being taken away from them, and they're still working on that, and now they gotta, assist their kid. It can be very difficult. So this is why we're having this discussion. So as an organization, that's something you guys need to start making an input into your organization. Not everybody is tech savvy. Not everybody knows how to, download WhatsApp or download this and stuff like that. And there are survivors that need basic training on that. And not only that, the victims that are still in the situation might not be able to have access, to like phone, or even if they do get a phone, how would they know what to respond in language? Ronnie mentioned it. Language is such a big thing, as a foreigner. If I'm stuck in a farm or stuck in a house as a domestic servitor and I only speak, Spanish or another, dialect, how will I communicate that through the phone? Because they don't really have a lot of different translation. When you have phones, it only has like French, Spanish, and English. There's not a lot that you can type in. So that's something that organizations really need to put into consideration. They need to start fighting, go out there. A great thing, we have a new administration. So try to go out there and get those grants, get those funding. We need this, we need to put this into organization. Hopefully this new administration will give us some money, because we need that money.
So you actually brought up one of the next questions, Evelyn, was kind of looking at what you're seeing in regards to funding. Are you seeing changes in the types of services that you're funding, or the types of services you would want to start funding? And how do you see that kind of changing as a result of COVID-19, or what have you seen already change?
That's a great question. Again, like I mentioned earlier when we started this discussion, I mentioned that human trafficking is one of the organizations that get least funding, and again, I know, talking to fellow survivor leader, we always go to organization and an organization will say, oh, we don't have funding, we're struggling, we're getting this, and that still baffles me why we are the least funded organization when it comes to ending human life. There's all type of causes, but this really baffles me. And I think that organizations, they have to step up in this issue. Like, hey, this is a serious issue. And as like we're talking right now, there are victims that have not made it alive due to COVID, and then you have survivors that due to COVID, they couldn't handle their mental state and probably took their own life, and things like that. And you're not able to reach them. You're not able to hear their story. So this goes out to organizations to say, hey, we need money. We need more money on this. You guys need to be, go out there, talk to these new administrations. Like, we need a lot of money. And this is human life. I don't know how you plan to go about it, but we need to get funding for human trafficking survivors and victims. I really echo that we need to find a way to do this. And, I know that not only that, Black life also came into place, and that's another cause that I'm very passionate about. But again, it still echo me why we don't get much funding when it comes to ending human trafficking as other courses. That's something organizations need to take, need to look into it and look into consideration. And for this year, 2021, organizations, less talking and more action. That's how I'm going to leave it. Less talking and more action. And we've given you all the insights and stuff.
Well, I think that we need to join forces in our advocacy efforts to look for funding related to COVID. I mean, there is a change in the funding scheme. There are donors that are not just the big mega billion donors, but there are other people that are really interested in what's happening because of COVID. So somehow we have to advocate together and reach out to organizations, have conversations about the need for this type of funding so that the people who go after the funding, the development people in organizations, will have that as a priority.
I agree.
Thank you. Did any of our other panelists have anything to add on the funding issue?
Oh, go ahead, Ronnie. I saw your hand.
No. I just want to say, yeah, we need to get together in this. Of course, you have our insight, you have our work experience with survivors and live experience with the COVID-19. I mean, there's a lot of data out there already to create something, a good proposal and get the money. We need to let them know that we need the money. Survivors, victims, we need the money. I mean, it's the reality. It's what we've been facing. So I believe if we get together on that and you got the right information, so I don't see the problem not to get the funding now. I know things have been changing a little bit due to COVID-19, but I think we have a big chance to just present a proposal to get approved and get the funding for those needs of survivors.
I have a follow-up recommendation for funding. So when it comes to funding, please think about funding for survivors who are no longer in services, who survivor like us, like me, Ronnie, Evelyn, even though we no longer in services, life happens. Sometimes we need help. And this is just the three of us here, but there are hundreds of them out there that I know of that need services or need resources, need funding, some help with rent, with food, especially at this time. And because we're not in the category of clients, we're not in the category of the survivors that are in the immediate need services, we cannot get funding or we cannot get help. So when you're allocating your funding, think about us, those who are survivor leaders that are struggling. I think that's it.
Great, thank you.
I think
sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add that I think the easy, everyone's going to say that everybody wants to do this, but, for service providers, it's our responsibility to kind of diversify our funding sources so that we're not just only dependent on one source of funding and we're not restricted to only certain parameters, which I know is much harder, easier said than done, but it's just, and I think that it's also our responsibility as service providers to educate our funders or funders in the community about the reality and the needs. And oftentimes what we have found is that funders are receptive and they're open to hearing, and you can often tell them, this is the needs we're seeing on the ground. This is the reality of what we need. And again, I don't want to say this is everybody's experience, but I think that it's our responsibility to educate the funders about the reality of the needs so that they can make the funding match or allow for eligible activities or expenses. Yeah, and I just really quickly, I wanted to share a resource because I think, Ronnie, you were the one who mentioned it, or somebody mentioned about, language, and this is not a replacement for using an in-person interpreter or an interpreter over the phone or live interpreter, but there is a website I'm going to put up that helps you translate any website address into a number of hundreds of different languages. So I just wanted to share that as a tool. So
that was something I was going to ask, if we can share any resources that we have for other organizations that might be here and don't know about anything. So if you have any link, anything, if you want to share that in the chat, and that would be good for the folks that are listening in.
Great, thank you. So we have just a few minutes left before we wrap up today. So I just kind of have one final kind of question for everyone that has come through from the COPS office. So as we stated earlier, this project was created in partnership with the COPS office, which is the Community-Oriented Policing Services. And we chose to hold it this month in January because it's National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. So the last kind of question that we have is just, what kind of message would each of you have to make sure that law enforcement are aware of, when addressing labor trafficking? What is something that you feel like your law enforcement partners might be missing when they're looking at these cases and working with you and working with the survivors? Don't all chime in at once. Ronnie?
No, in my case, it's just to think about the situation. It's been already difficult without COVID, and with COVID-19, it just works. So it's just to be a little bit more sensitive on survival when approaching them, and try to work it out. And I know it's difficult for them because in order to, to get the information they want, or the true reaction of a person, because through Zoom or a call, it's not the same. You cannot get the same reaction when you're talking to someone. So I know for law enforcement, it's really difficult as well. It's just to try to work it out with survivors. That would be.
And Ileana?
Yes, I just kind of echo what Ronnie said, because I think that being trauma informed is very important for law enforcement. Knowing what survivor of labor trafficking goes through is in order to make that connection. Because yes, we know that survivors of commercial sex work go through a lot, but labor trafficking survivors also suffer trauma. And I think that is a very important piece that I think is missing in when working with survivors of labor trafficking. So yeah, being trauma informed is very important.
Great, thank you. Unless our panelists have anything additional, I'm going to turn it over to the COPS office just to kind of close us out today.
I was going to just say echo what Ronnie and Ileana said. Another thing with law enforcement, it has to be collaboration, and also important thing. This is a great thing that, the COP office is doing, but law enforcement, not only few law enforcement, training is very important. Try to get training from all form of, survivors of human trafficking, and things like that, especially foreign national survivors, collaborate with, service provider, and please, law enforcement, get training on the issue. Try your best to get access to survivors that have already been out there. They are speaking as far as like language. If you have a difficulty understanding like what this person is saying, maybe you can reach out to a survivor that you have heard can help you with that language. But the key word is collaboration and training.
Great, thank you. Well, at this time, I'm just going to turn it over to Ms. Nazmia Comrie from the COPS office for any closing comments today.
Wow, thank you all so much for such an informative panel and discussion. I really just appreciate, once again, all the speakers and facilitators taking the time to open up and share about your perspectives, your experience, your stories. I think that it was really valuable. I also just want to thank, once again, all the participants that have joined us today. I don't think any of us thought last March that we would be still talking about COVID, almost, getting to a year later. And I think we're going to be continuing to talk about COVID for a very long time. So I think that these conversations are really valuable for us to continue to modify and really figure out how we can make sure that we're not only supporting survivors and service providers, but also getting the necessary resources out there. So again, behalf of the COPS Office leadership, I just want to thank you all so much for your time. And I just want to put in a plug for the new resources that were released last week under this Partnerships to Address Labor Trafficking. A lot of really great, valuable information that is just like the first part of what we're providing to help a wide variety of different audiences on addressing labor trafficking. So thank you all so much, and I'll hand it back to Amanda if she wants to say anything from IAR.
Thank you, Nazmia. I don't have any more comments, just thank you, everybody. We have some contact information up on the screen. If you have any questions for any of our panelists that come up afterwards that you think of, feel free to reach out to us and we can pass along that information, and just thank everybody for their time today.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, wonderful panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.